Welcome back. Now, for the last few classes, we've been talking about the problem of evil and whether the theist, that is, someone who believes in God, can offer a convincing theodicy, that is, a convincing way out of the problem. We said the best hope for that was this free will theodicy that we saw in Plantinga and we saw sort of briefly mentioned but kind of pushed aside by Mackey. I think that's the best response, but here's the thing. That's going to work just in case we have free will. And as we're going to see today and in the next few lectures, it's just not obvious that we do have free will. So we're going to take up this question today and in the next two lectures, reading some papers and watching some films, as is sort of the format of the class. And but first we're going to do a little bit of preliminary stuff about free will, so we just all are on the same page and know what it is we're saying. So, as with anything in philosophy, the first thing for us to do is to get really clear about what we mean by freedom or free will. Now, most people have thought that freedom means something like having the ability to do otherwise. So, if I go to the movies tonight, I went to the movies freely just in case I could have done something other than go to the movies. Now, if I were kidnapped and held at gunpoint and forced to go to the movies, which is probably the only way you would catch me seeing the new Avatar film, then probably I haven't gone freely, or certainly I haven't gone freely, because I couldn't have done otherwise. So, by freedom, we tend to mean having the ability to do otherwise. And most people think that in order for us to be free, we have to have that. So we have that on the one hand. That's sort of our intuitive take and what a lot of philosophers think we mean by freedom. Now, at the same time, our best physical theories, sort of, Einstein and Newton and all these sorts of things, suggest that the universe and the laws that govern it are deterministic. Now, what does that mean? You've heard me mention this, I think, in previous lectures. So what do we mean to say it's deterministic? Well, that's just to say that the initial input causally determines the output of something. So a system's deterministic if the input sort of guarantees an output. And taken to its logical conclusion, we get the thesis of determinism, or causal determinism, according to which the initial state of the universe, so that's how things were sort of at the moment of the Big Bang, plus the laws of nature, that is, all the sort of rules that govern how things go around here, guarantees every later state of the universe. So determinism is the idea that for any time t1, t2, t3, the state at t0 plus the laws of nature will guarantee those future states. So here's an example of this. So suppose I make a paper airplane and I throw it across the room. It's going to land somewhere, but it seems like it can land in precisely one place, and that particular landing place will be causally determined by, for example, the weight of the plane, the force with which I threw it, the density of the air in the room, various facts about lift and drag, and so on. Now, it seems also that if we knew all of the relevant inputs, right, we knew how much the paper weighed, we knew what the wind was doing in the room, we knew all the facts about lift and drag, we knew everything there was to know that went to the input, then we could predict with 100% accuracy where the plane would land. Moreover, if we were to rewind a bit and play my throwing the paper plane again, the exact same thing would happen. So, widening this out a bit, suppose there's some super intelligence with nearly infinite computational power and full knowledge of all the laws of the universe and the initial position of all the particles in the universe. Let's call this Laplace's demon, named after the, 18th century philosopher, mathematician, astronomer Laplace. Now, suppose further that we tell the demon the initial state of the universe and ask it what will happen at some later time. Right? So we have a super smart, super computationally powerful being. It has full knowledge of the laws of nature, and we've given it the initial position of all the particles in the universe. If determinism is true, then the demon will be able to predict with 100% accuracy everything that's going to happen. Moreover, if we give the demon some later state of the universe and ask it to work backwards, it'll be able to do that too. And similarly to the plane, the paper plane we talked about, if we were to rewind the whole universe and then hit play, things would play out just the same as they did before. Now, it seems like we humans are very much like the paper airplanes. Sure, we're significantly more complicated, but there's nothing about us that Laplace's demon couldn't handle. So the idea is, again, we have a tension, right? We have a tension on the one hand. We have this view about freedom. We could have done otherwise. We're the author of our own decisions, yada, yada, yada. But on the other hand, we have this thesis of determinism, which seems supported by science and scientific theories. And on that view, there's nothing like the free choice that we have. We couldn't do otherwise. We could do precisely one thing. And the one thing we could do is based on the prior state of the universe, all the way back to the big moment of the Big Bang, plus the laws of nature. So one important note, determinism is just the thesis about how the universe is, right? It doesn't require that there be any intelligent designer or any God. No one is sort of making the decisions and then we're sort of doing them. It's just particles plus laws. Initial state plus laws. That's all. You don't need any puppet master. There's no one holding any strings. And it's distinct from fatalism, which only holds that sort of some outcomes are determined. So determinism says you're going to wind up where you wind up, and you're going to take exactly one route to get there, and that's what's sort of determined by the particle's position at the initial moment of the Big Bang plus the laws. Fatalism sort of says you're going to wind up at some spot, and the path you take to get there can be meandery and branchy, but either way, like, you're going to wind up here. So we don't mean fatalism, and we don't mean that someone is sort of puppet mastering things. This is just sort of a fact about how the universe seems to be, or a supposed fact about how the universe seems to be. So again, the tension. On the one hand, we think we have free will. That is, we think we have the ability to do otherwise. But on the other, our best physical theories say that we live in a deterministic universe. The apparent truth of determinism, then, just means that we can't possibly have the ability to do otherwise. Now, initially you might think, come on, man, this is easy. We can just say determinism is false. After all, some laws of nature are probabilistic, things like to do with half-life, radioactive decay, and things like this. But it's not so clear that this helps. So suppose that determinism is false, and so we don't live in a deterministic universe. Well, this suggests that nothing causally determines anything else. It's all just random. But here's a worry. My giving these lectures right now was sort of causally determined by my brain and by neural states and by my having a desire to do so and by my speaking. And like, there are a number of things that are causing the words to come out of my mouth right now. But if none of that's determined, if it's all just random, then I really can't be said to have chosen to do any of these things either, right? So if determinism is false, it seems like I'm not free either, because all my actions are just random. It's just happening. So regardless of whether determinism is true, it seems like we're not free. If determinism is true, I'm not free. If indeterminism is true, right, if it's all just random, then I'm not free. So it seems like I'm not free in either case. So that's sort of the lay of the land here. We have a tension, and it seems like there's not an obvious way out, which is fertile ground for doing philosophy. So here's a preview of some of the logical space, some of the responses you might make. We're going to read one representative from each of these camps. So one way to respond to all the things I've just said about determinism is to just say, yeah, that's right. Determinism's true. We can't do otherwise. We're not free. People who offer this response are called incompatibilists or hard determinists. Depending on what you read, they mean the same thing. They hold that free will is incompatible with determinism. So Holbach, who we're going to read for today, is one such person. Another way to respond is to try to find sort of a way in which free will is compatible with determinism. Now, we call a view like this compatibilism or soft determinism. Again, they mean the same. And the typical move here is to think of freedom in a different kind of way, right? We've said that freedom consists in the ability to do otherwise. But if we recast freedom to mean something else, as Walter Stace does, and we'll see in the next lecture, maybe we can find a sort of a way to thread this needle. And the people who try to do this are compatibilists. Finally, you might say that there's got to be some determinism, right? It's just that things can't be wholly determined. Now, folks who hold this position, which include me, are indeterminists, or libertarians is another thing we call them. So Chisholm, Roderick Chisholm, one of my favorite philosophers, who we'll read after Walter Stace, is a libertarian or an indeterminist about free will. He thinks that while we need some determinism sort of to anchor things, it can't be full determinism. Otherwise, like, we're not free. So you might think, like, okay, it sure feels like I'm free. Whether I'm free or not, I'm just going to keep on living like I'm free. That's going to be good enough for me. And that's fair enough. I think that's a thing a lot of people have said. Certainly it seems reasonable to sort of continue on that way. But you might ask the sort of deeper probing question. So, like, what's at stake here? Like, why should we care? It seems like a lot of ink has been spilt on this topic, so why should we care? Well, here's the thing. Suppose that I kill somebody. I murder them. And it's premeditated. It's not a crime of passion. Like, I decide I'm going to murder someone. I plan it out, and then I murder them. You want to say, oh, well, Pat, the thing that Pat did was very bad, and he's morally responsible for that thing, and he's blameworthy for that thing, and we should do something to punish him for that thing. But here's the question. If I didn't do anything, right? If I'm not sort of free in any kind of real way, in virtue of what am I blameworthy, right? It seems like we only hold people responsible, or we only should hold people responsible for things that they did. So we have the one murder case where I premeditate it and I kill somebody. Now suppose, and it seems to us like I should be culpable because I did it. I'm the one who did it. But now consider another situation where someone sort of holds a gun to my head and says, hey, kill that guy. It seems like I'm less blameworthy if I'm blameworthy at all in that case. And why? It's precisely because I didn't have a choice. So it seems like if we want to make sense of our normal practices of assigning praise and blame to people for the things that they do, then we need to have some notion of freedom robust enough for people to count as making choices. Because if they're not making any choices, and it's just not obvious that we can make sense of our moral talk and our responsibility talk, and that's a big problem. So that's kind of what's at stake, and that's enough scene setting. So let's just talk about the Holbach paper. I think pretty briefly, actually. There's not a whole lot to say about it. It's reading it is a bit different. You know, it's 18th century, very sort of high prose. I think what a lot of people think of when they think philosophy for philosophical writing is they think of things like Holbach. But he says more or less what we've already talked about. The universe is deterministic. Humans are part of the universe. And anyway, as Holbach says, we seem not to be doing much choosing or even pseudo-choosing. So the universe is deterministic. Humans are part of the universe. That rules out free will, but we persist in our delusion that we're free agents. And Holbach says, like, look, it's understandable that we do. We're not Laplace's demon. We couldn't possibly become aware of the very many factors that determine our actions. It's just too vast and complex a web. But if we did know, right, if we knew all the relevant facts and all the relevant laws, then, you know, determining what I'm going to say next would be no different than determining where the paper plane would land. So that's incompatibilism, right? It's the notion. It's just this saying like, yeah, that's right. We don't have the ability to do otherwise. That means we're not free. That's it. Yeah, so that's sort of a lay of the land. That's the Holbach position. We're going to talk about a compatibilist, as I said, and a libertarian or indeterminist position in the coming lectures. But for now, let's talk a bit about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Great movie. Tom Stoppard is brilliant. I love his plays. It's based on a play. If anyone's interested, I have a copy of the play that stars Daniel Radcliffe from the Harry Potter movies as one of the leads, and I can share that with you all. But we're watching the film from the 90s with Tim Roth and Gary Oldman, both wonderful. And if you don't know, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are sort of bit characters from Shakespeare's play Hamlet. I assume most of you have read it, which is, quite frankly, not the way to experience Shakespeare. It wasn't meant to be read. That would be like me doing a film class, and rather than having you to watch the films, just having you to read the screenplays. That'd be a pretty weird thing. So Shakespeare's meant to be watched, right? They're plays. So if you've only read it and haven't watched it, again, let me know, and I can share with you or point you towards a fantastic production of Hamlet, directed by Gregory Doran, starring David Tennant and Patrick Stewart. It's pretty great. It's good. It's long, but it's great. So what the film does is it portrays it's a pretty cool thing that the film does. We get a version of Hamlet, right? But it's seen from the perspective of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And again, we get like sort of Tom Stoppard's wonderful wordplay. Now I don't have much to say about the movie other than keep in mind this free will and determinism question. It seems like the universe of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is of course a deterministic universe, but it's one where hard determinism seems really true. These characters have a path, and they're going to walk it. Hamlet's going to do what Hamlet does. The king's going to do what Claudius does. Everyone's going to do just what they do. In a way, we've rewound back Hamlet. We've looked at it from a different perspective, and things are going to play out just the same as they do. So it's a very nice dramatization. I think a very cool picture of what a deterministic universe in which hard determinism is definitely true looks like. So it's going to give us sort of a picture of something I think we would have had a hard time imagining otherwise. And I think, at least for my part, that's what a lot of these films allow us to do. You'll have noticed over the last several lectures that a lot of what we talk about is like, oh, well, imagine this, or suppose that, or here's a cool thought experiment. In many ways, films are just thought experiments, right? They're just saying, well, let's suppose this, and then let's make this movie. And it lets us see a little bit more clearly than we might be able to. That's why some TV shows like Black Mirror, I think, are so good, even though they tend towards, I think, needless, grim dark for the sake of grim dark kind of things. But don't get me started on that. Anyways, that's sort of the lay of the land for the free will stuff. Again, we have a tension between this sort of common sense intuition that we have the ability to do otherwise, and this sort of fact about the universe that seems to be a deterministic universe. The question is, how do we reconcile them, if we can reconcile them at all? And we should care about this because we care about moral responsibility. We then talked about Holbach and sort of one paper and position that takes sort of the hard determinist, incompatibilist position. And we chatted a bit about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Next time we'll discuss Walter Stace's piece and the 1962 film The Manchurian Candidate, which is quite good. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.